and Lyingham being in Broadkill 100, Sussex County. The properties are lying on the west side of Coastal Highway, which is Route 1, and on the north side of Roundpole Bridge Road, which is Sussex County Route 257. The 911 address is not available, and the tax parcel ID is District 235, Map 16, parcels 68.00 and 69.00. The zoning district is AR1, Agricultural Residential District, and submitted into the record, Mr. Chairman, and I will need a minute to make sure I have all of these. So we have the applicant's preliminary subdivision plan, we have a copy of the applicant's exhibit booklet, we have a copy of the plus comments and the applicant's response to the plus comments, we have a copy of the staff review letter and the applicant's response to the staff review letter, we have a copy of the applicant's traffic impact study and the DELDOT response to that traffic impact study. We also have a copy of the applicant's Chapter 99-9C response. We also, including in the applicant's exhibit booklet, there is a letter from Artesian Resources, and there is in the applicant's geotechnical report, along with a jurisdictional determination letter, and also an FAA letter, which is a determination as to no hazard navigation letter included in the exhibit booklet. We also have submitted into the record a copy of the TAC responses, including responses from Sussex County Engineering Department. We have a copy of a letter received from the US Fish and Wildlife. We have a copy of a letter received from DENREC, Division of Watershed Stewardship. We also have a copy of a letter received from Delaware Electric Co-op, a letter received from the Delaware Forest Service, and a letter received from the US Department of Agriculture. We also have a letter which is on your desk in printed format from the manager of the Delaware Coastal Airport. In total, in terms of public comments, Mr. Chairman, there are 79 public comments submitted into the record. I would note that some of them appear to be duplicates. They may have been submitted to different people at the same time. And I did have an update just on the number of comments that were received in the last 24 hours. Approximately 25 of the responses were received in the last 24 hours, and the office did receive a number of questions today about how long does it take between hitting that submit button to submit your comments and the comments actually being published to our document management system. I wish to point out it's not instantaneous, there is a delay, but those comments that have been received have been entered into the record. The legal record, as Ms Robertson, correct me if I'm wrong, is the paper record held, and those comments have been received, and I understand that those comments have all now been processed. So there's a bit of a delay is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Good evening, Chairman Wheatley, Commissioners, Council Robertson, Director Whitehouse, members of planning staff, and members of the public. My name is Mackenzie Peete, and I'm an attorney with the law firm of Behrman, Dallas, Brockstead, Federico, and Cordea. And I'm here on behalf of the applicant owner, Twin Mast, LLC. Our project team includes Jim Erickson, PE, with Solutions. You obviously know Mr. Erickson. And Betty Tustin, PE and PTOE with the traffic group. Unfortunately, she could not be here this evening, but we do have information to submit into the record on her behalf, and Mr. Erickson will cover her portion of the presentation. Megan Connor and Hal Stewart are also here on behalf of the applicant as well. And finally, Ed Linne, who you're familiar with, professional wetland scientist, will also speak during our presentation this evening. The applicant has submitted, as Director Whitehouse stated, an extensive exhibit booklet and set of documents for your consideration that has been before you for at least 10 days. I will provide an overview of the project and then turn the presentation over to Mr. Linne and Mr. Erickson. I'll conclude the presentation by addressing the project's compliance with the AR1 cluster development requirements of the Municipal Code Section 115-25 ENF and Municipal Code Section 99-C subdivision requirements and the plan's consistency and conformity with the comprehensive development plan. I will also submit proposed conditions of approval at this time for your consideration. And in addition, I'm going to submit, there's multiple copies of the proposed conditions of approval. I'm also going to submit one paper copy of exhibits that will be discussed during the traffic portion discussion of our presentation that Mr. Erickson also has a USB to submit into the record as well.
Pete, I'm going to ask you to pull that other microphone down as well, because I think folks have a little bit of difficulty hearing you.
Sure, I'll speak up. As a project summary, the applicant proposes Twin Masts, which proposes to divide two undeveloped parcels, a total of 132.9 acres more or less, into 249 single-family lots as a cluster subdivision in the agricultural residential district. The project originally proposed 245 single-family homes, but was increased to 249 after learning that there was additional site area. Mr. Erickson confirmed that the project did not require resubmission to PLUS for the additional 4 units as evidenced in the record. You would have seen an email between Mr. Erickson and the Office of State Planning Coordination. The entire project is located in the low-density area, a designated rural area, according to the 2018 Sussex County Comprehensive Plan. A portion of the acreage, as you'll note on the preliminary plan, is to be devoted to lots. A portion is to be devoted to streets, and 68.41 acres, or 51.5%, more or less, of the parcel is anticipated to be devoted to interconnected open space, subject to final site engineering. The proposed cluster subdivision is superior in design to a standard subdivision, as the project proposes significant amounts of open space in excess of the code's requirements, landscape buffers compliant with the code requirements that are designed to protect environmentally sensitive areas on this site, including regulated tidal and non-tidal wetlands, and a stormwater management system that will act as an amenity and natural companion to the natural features on this site. This plan provides for amenities including a pool and bathhouse and sidewalks on both sides of the street that will connect to the proposed multimodal path as well. The project, as you can see on the screen, is specifically located on the northern side of Round Pole Bridge Road, adjacent to the Beaver Dam Creek. And then if you zoom out, this entire area is what we're talking about today. And it specifically encompasses 2 parcels, parcel 235-16-68 and 69. Both parcels are owned by the applicant, Twin Mast LLC, and nearby subdivisions include Pintail Point, Cripple Creek, Covington Chase, River Rock Run, Creek Falls Farm, and Windstone, to name some. The site, as you can see, is currently a vacant use, with portions of the property used for agriculture and portions of the property consisting of existing vegetation. In terms of environmental features, there are 8.38 acres of tidal wetlands and 4.62 acres of non-tidal wetlands. If we can pull up the preliminary plan specifically, you'll see on page 2 of the preliminary plan the existing site conditions, and you'll see specifically where the environmentally sensitive portions of the property are located. I believe it's at the beginning. We can use the cover page, that's fine. Thank you. So you'll see that the environmentally sensitive portions of the property are located here, and Mr. Erickson and Mr. Linné will discuss these areas in detail. If approved, there will be 249 single-family lots with an actual density of 1.99 dwelling units per acre. Sussex County's base density is 2 units per acre, as the Commission knows, permitting 249 single-family units on this 132.9-acre site. The concept plan for Twin Mast was presented to PLUS on August 25, 2021, and a response letter was subsequently provided on January 24, 2022, which addressed each comment point by point. This plan was also sent through the Technical Advisory Committee, or TAC. As the commissioners are aware, and as the room suggests too, with the presence of the public, there's some interest in this application. Issues that have been raised include concerns related to development near the Eagle Crest Hudson Aerodrome, traffic, and development in environmentally sensitive areas. We will specifically address these issues in our presentation today, but I do want to address some of those issues generally before my team addresses them specifically. First, this project is located within 1/2 mile of a turf aircraft runway located at the Eagle Crest Fields Aerodrome. And if we could switch back to the aerial, that would be helpful. So this specific small airport is located here, and there's an existing runway in this vicinity. The past 2 afternoons that have turned into evenings, our project met with this community after learning late last week that there are some concerns. And again today, Mr. Stewart met with representatives of the community. Our team considered the Eagle Crest community's concerns regarding noise and safety and proffers a condition of approval that you will see. It's specifically condition P to address some of the concerns raised. The condition P states, the declaration and restriction shall state that the site is located approximately 1/2 mile from a turf runway used for private personal aircrafts. the developer shall consider the relocation of lots number 132, 133, 236, 237, and 249 as identified on the preliminary plan for allocation of open space. And please keep in mind that is specifically added, that last sentence, because of our time constraint with adjusting a preliminary plan basically 2 days before the hearing. To be clear, our team researched the applicability of the FAA's regulation to this private airport previously. And specifically, Mr. Erickson will discuss some of this. But we learned that the FAA's regulations are not applicable to this private airport, but understand the Eagle Crest community's reference to the regulations as guidelines that they desire to follow. I say all of this to point out that the proffered condition is really designed as an additional precautionary measure to address noise and safety, and not something that the FAA requires. The proposed condition provides that the declaration and restrictions of the community's governing documents shall state that the site is located approximately 1/2 mile from a turf runway used for aircrafts. There was quite a bit of discussion that has also made its way into the paper record about what is commonly known as runway safety areas or zones. And I would caution the Commission's incorporation of any reference to a runway safety area or zone, because that's a defined term in the FAA regulations, which are not applicable. I would just ask that the draft condition as presented be considered as is.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
Because the last sentence of that, the developer shall consider the relocation of lots 132, 133, 236, 237, 234. That doesn't really say much. I mean, it just says we can think about it. We might not move it. I mean,
so we've already taken measures and met with the community and shown them a potential sketch, which actually Mr. Erickson will address with the Commission today. And that will make its way potentially into the record.
Are they going to be moved or not? Because right now, as I read that, that has no meaning really whatsoever, because it just says shall consider. I mean, you know, like I said,
there's an ability to move the lots,
okay,
and that will be discussed during our presentation.
Okay. Well, it seems like that condition probably needs to be redrafted.
Sure.
Yeah.
We also started a working draft on an airport notice related to noise to be considered for inclusion in the HOA documents. That language is at this point subject to change, but the representatives of the Eagle Crest community asked that I read the same into the record. The current language provides a section titled Airport Notice and states this subdivision is located approximately 1/2 mile from a turf runway used for private personal aircrafts. There may be flights over the subdivision that will generate noise associated with aircraft in flight or aircraft engines operating. The use and enjoyment of property within this subdivision is expressly conditioned on acceptance of any annoyance or inconvenience which may result from such normal airport uses and activities. So this language is taken from other governing documents in other communities. It's slightly modified, but something that we're working on and confirming on the record that we'll keep an open line of communication with Eagle Crest to ensure that this is addressed in the community's governing documents. The second issue that was raised repeatedly in public comment concerned traffic. A traffic impact study was performed by the traffic group and is made part of the record. Betty Tustin, as I stated, was unable to attend this evening, but she prepared a summary letter for the Commissioner's review and consideration regarding the TIS that I submitted and that Mr. Erickson will review, and some of the concerns raised by the public. The third issue is that appeared repeatedly in public comment concerned wetlands, tree removal, and buffer requirements. Mr. Linné and Mr. Erickson are prepared to speak in detail on both of these issues, but I want to be clear that buffers from the tidal and non-tidal wetlands have been provided at the time of, in compliance with the code at the time of the submission of the application, and also has code-compliant buffers in place. The final point I'll make before turning over this presentation is that the project will be on public water and sewer, not septic. There was some comments about that as well, and that's anticipated to be provided by Artesian. With that, I'll turn over my presentation to Mr. Linné, followed by Mr. Erickson, and then conclude thereafter.
Good evening. I'm Edward Linné from Environmental Resources Incorporated. I'm a professional wetland scientist located in Selbyville, Delaware. I'm a professional wetland scientist and environmental consultant. Part of my job was to evaluate this site with respect to wetlands and environmental resources. So as you heard, the site's 132 acres. 6.9 acres. On its perimeter, there's the Broadkill River and Beaver Dam Creek, and there's state-regulated tidal wetlands, also regulated by the Corps of Engineers, that borders those creeks and borders the upland portion of this site. Around the edge of the tidal wetlands, there's a fringe of forested non-tidal wetlands that extends for various distances until the land rises and becomes more well-drained soil types. There's approximately 4.6 acres of non-tidal wetlands around the perimeter of the site that buffer the non-tidal wetlands. As you just heard, at the time of when this project was submitted as a preliminary subdivision application, the Sussex County Code required a 50-foot buffer from the state-regulated tidal wetlands, and that's been provided on the site plan. In addition, the applicant has also proffered and volunteered a 25-foot buffer from the federally regulated non-tidal wetland boundary. Essentially, on the interior of the site, there's 79.7 acres of agricultural field, and bordering the wooded wetlands, there's 44.2 acres of upland forest around the perimeter site. The bulk of that forest, the larger portion of that forest, is on the northern end of the site. We performed a wetlands delineation that was surveyed. Wetland delineation plan was prepared. That plan and report was submitted to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which I believe is in your record, I'm going to provide another copy, issued an approved jurisdictional determination codifying the wetland boundaries that Solutions and I determined to be on the property. So those boundaries have all been approved. The elevations on this site, as you get from the non-tidal wetland area to the interior of the site, range anywhere from 5 feet to 20 feet in elevation. The site is well elevated, and it is also there's a suite of soils on this particular property that are well-drained loamy sands, and some of the particular soil series, Fort Mott loamy sand, Henalopen loamy sand, Rosedale loamy sands. These are all soil types that have a good separation between the surface and groundwater, and have few limitations with respect to development, and are highly desirable from a development perspective. In terms of the forest areas on the site, and in addition to the buffers, again, there's 44.2 acres of forest on that site. 41% of that forest will be retained, and that amounts to approximately 18.1 acres. Another thing that I wanted to kind of mention is that, and this has to do with some of the sandy nature and quality of the soils on the site, is in the northern part of the site, we identified 6 old borrow pit areas. And essentially, back in the late 60s, when they were building Route 1, they were building the overpass over the river, I think these borrow pit areas were used to provide soil for that road construction. And so with the exception of one of these, they're essentially relatively small, isolated pockets in the ground that are filled with water seasonally. There's one larger one that's does have some wetlands vegetation in it. That was all, and because they were dry land, they were borrow pit excavations excavated out of dry land, and they're, again, totally isolated and surrounded by existing uplands. Those features are not regulated by the Corps of Engineers, and that was codified in the Corps' approved jurisdictional determination letter. With respect to, and again, it may be in the record, but I have a letter at the beginning of the project. I did get in touch in terms of threatened and endangered species concerns with the Division of Fish and Wildlife Service at DNREC, Division of Fish and Wildlife at DNREC, and they basically asking whatever concerns or state rare or endangered species might be of concern to them, and essentially I'll submit that letter. There were none. And I would mention, I think, in terms of federal species out there, there is one species that has recently shown up as a threatened species, and that's a marsh inhabiting bird that inhabits areas deep in the salt marsh areas called the eastern black rail, and that's a threatened species. So there's a chance that with all the extensive wetlands that are along the Broadkill River, tidal wetlands, that is definitely suitable habitat. And again, but this particular project is buffered and isn't proposing any type of water access, docks, piers, or any other type of structures. I think that about covers what I can tell you about the property. Thank you.
You can just drop it in there. Left side. Let me take it over.
Taking over. It's probably a good idea. In the meantime, my name is Jim Erickson. I'm a professionally licensed civil engineer in the state of Delaware, as well as a principal engineer at Solutions IPM, and the engineer of record on this project. So Mr. Linné has gone over the wetlands associated with this project, and what I'd like to do is kind of go over the overall site layout for this project, as well as just go through some land planning considerations and provide some additional details and descriptions. So one thing I wanted to point out as I get started here is that land planning is a bit of an iterative process. What I mean by that is you begin with a concept, and that concept gets adjusted as you learn more about the project. When I begin, we first start drawing, we don't have official wetland delineations. We don't have official boundaries. And as we kind of obtain more information, those things shift to accommodate what we found. You make adjustments based on information you learn. So when we began land planning here, we knew there was going to be wetlands on the site and or around the site. And so that was the immediate area that we focused on, in accordance with the code's superior design requirements. So the first thing we wanted to make sure of is that we provided adequate buffers around the tidal areas. As has been mentioned before, the minimum buffer at the time of application was 50 feet. And the non-tidal buffer we provided was 25 feet. And so we treated those as kind of minimum standards on this application. So in addition to the wetlands, there was also some floodplains in those areas, kind of in the vicinity of the wetlands, and we wanted to limit the number of lots that would encroach in those floodplains. Those floodplains do have what's called base flood elevations associated with them, meaning that there's a defined elevation that if you raise that grade above that elevation, you can remove that area from the floodplain. So we kind of took all that into consideration and also thought through that, well, if we're raising any of these areas, we do have to then grade back and connect to the existing grade prior to reaching the wetlands, and ideally prior to reaching those buffers. And so, we considered all those items. And we ended up with an average setback distance from the tidal wetlands to the back of lots and or ponds of approximately 186 feet across the property. So if you look at this exhibit here, the red area is that area I'm describing, and that average width is about 186 feet. So that dark, thick line that's shown here is the 50-foot minimum buffer. As you can see, we provide well above, the offset on there. And I think this, does a very good job kind of providing that visualization. In addition to that, what we also did was we tried to minimize the clearing of trees within the actual 50-foot buffer. Aside from a few isolated areas, most notably the stormwater management discharge points where we have to actually go in there and dig to connect to grade. The area within that 50-foot tidal buffer largely remains. Overall, the plats are showing 18.192 acres of trees remaining, which is about 41.1% of the trees on the site. So what we tried to do was make sure that those trees in the most sensitive areas would remain. So similar to that exhibit, this next one shows that same kind of visual with the non-tidal wetland buffer. The average distance between the non-tidal wetland line to the back of lots and or ponds in the preliminary plat is about 150 feet. Again, we established that minimum distance as 25 feet. Minimum buffer distance is 25 feet in our plans. So similarly, if you look at this exhibit, you can see where the site abuts some residential uses along Hudson Road as well as Round Pole Bridge Road. There's some existing buffer areas, existing wooded areas where we provided a forested buffer along those edges. So we left a gap behind the lots rather than abutting lots to those buffers, so that way we can accommodate drainage as well as grading connections. And unfortunately, when site topography was completed and we got into grading the site, what we realized is that the way we had it drawn, the buffer was not going to be feasible to remain with those trees without getting into, those trees were not able to be remain within that buffer without, grading into it. And so, as I described earlier, land planning is a bit of an iterative process, so what we did is we shifted everything more centrally located. We provide a little more distance for those lots around the perimeter in an effort to keep those trees while providing reasonable grades around the perimeter and being able to connect them. So another environmental consideration for the land plan, Ed Linné has already brought up, but it is in the southeastern portion of the site. You can see there's a kind of a darker line that goes up in that area, and that's the area of excellent groundwater recharge. So in accordance with county code, within that area, we maintained less than 35% of impervious area. We did what we could to try to, provide open space in that area as well as a pond that should aid in providing some additional groundwater recharge. So speaking of stormwater management, the site will handle stormwater management via 6 proposed stormwater management facilities, which you can see here. It's anticipated at this time the facilities will be extended detention wet ponds. All stormwater management design will be in accordance with the DENREC regulations. Stormwater conveyance will mostly be accomplished via closed conduit storm drain systems internal to the site. And there will be some swales to convey runoff in open space areas. So those conveyance systems and lot drainage system will be designed in accordance with both Sussex County and DENREC standards. And as you can see, the ponds are arranged in open space with 4 located in the central area and 2 located around the perimeter. So this project does have considerable open space, as already been mentioned. Approximately 68 acres of the site is within open space, which is approximately 51% of the site. The perimeter open space is contiguous and consists of over 51 acres. In addition to the perimeter open space, the interior space that mainly drove the design were defined as areas B and D in the preliminary plat. And so those areas, if you come down the main road, those are those 2 areas on your right-hand side. And those areas were very much intentionally located. So when we were working on the land plan for Twin Mast, we were aware that there's an airport in the vicinity of the project. We were working through the conceptual layouts. We generally tried to keep that open space in alignment with the runway for Eagle Crest. So if you look at this exhibit, you can see the larger open space areas that are central to the project were kept in line, general line with the projected runway, which again was very much intentional. We've done small airport considerations in the past on some of our projects, so we are familiar with vertical clearances and those calculations to determine, how high up and make sure we don't provide an actual obstruction in the path of the flight. So just to kind of give you some numbers here, the airport's going to be about 10 feet higher than the grade in the subdivision on that projected runway, meaning you're starting 10 feet above it, just above grade, just to begin. By the time the planes reach Hudson Road there, they're going to be 15 feet in the air to get over that road safely. Then they will continue to rise as they get further and further along the way. And, just a reminder, the maximum height allowed in AR1 subdivision is 42 feet. So by the time the planes would reach the vicinity of the homes in the twin masts, the altitude based on a 20-to-1 slope would be about 120 feet above grade. Above grade, yes. And in speaking to the pilots at Eagle Crest, that elevation for the planes would likely be more like 200 feet or so in that area. So for a frame of reference, if you've ever been to the Statue of Liberty, the distance between the top of that house and where those planes are projected to be flying over top of it is about the statue portion of the Statue of Liberty, which is 152 feet tall. The distance is, one statue. But as we went through the planning process, we did go to the FAA to perform a determination, but unfortunately, because the FAA does not regulate this private airport, they did a determination for the Georgetown Airport, which was not overly useful, unfortunately. Instead, so similarly, there's no mentions of airport or regulation standards with the PLUS process, and even if there were any mentions of the airport, there's no actual regulation or design standards associated with it. And so, how do you comply with something that doesn't really have regulation? So in the event that there's no regulations in place, what we would typically look to is what kind of restrictions are currently out there that they're already operating around. So we looked at the southern end of the runway, and we said that we tried to more or less mirror what they were doing there. So if you look at this exhibit, you can see a dimension of about 1,520 linear feet from the runway. There's some trees that would be an obstruction. And then there's several existing homes in the Red Fox Run subdivision that are within that projected runway, and those lots begin approximately 2,050 feet from the edge of that runway. So if we go back to that similar exhibit that we made for Twin Mast, the future right-of-way location for the site is located further than those trees are on the south side, and then the lots are about 1,931 linear feet from the runway, meaning that we generally are providing a similar situation that they have on the south on the north. So, as such, our plans reflected this condition, these conditions, and, it's a pretty similar situation on both sides. So obviously this is a pretty unique situation, and once we started seeing the public input and the concerns that were being brought up, we made an effort to meet with some of the pilots with the Eagle Crest to learn more information. So we discussed their concerns and obtained a bit of an understanding about what the pilots felt could be done in order to provide a safer layout. So, as was mentioned, the conditions proffered by Ms. Pete, we were willing to relocate lots per their input in order to provide a greater area open space. And, again, as described above, land planning can be a bit of an iterative process. You learn more, you make adjustments to make it better, which is what we were trying to do. And so we certainly would be willing, and I know that condition wording appears to be a bit problematic, but we fully intended on, accommodating those revisions of those lots that are mentioned in there. That was not.
Can you show me where those lots are, so the condition where the lots are? Because the numbers you've described don't match up with the numbers, at least on the plan I'm looking at. I don't think they do. They seem like they're just random.
I hope they don't, because it doesn't make sense to me either. I was looking at those lots.
Yeah.
So, hey, Jamie, can you pull up the preliminary plat? So as a worst-case scenario, I can show you the intended lots kind of on this exhibit. Okay, and so can you scroll down to, I think it's going to be split between pages, of course, so I believe it's mostly on Plan G. Okay, so at the risk of losing the mic here. It's hard to see. Okay, so I will have to reread the condition. You know what might be better?
Lots 132, 133.
Right, so lots 132, 133 are those basically two to the bottom left here. Keep left. You know what?
Let him control it.
There you go. Sorry, he was trying to do that, and I was thinking he was still going. So basically 132 and 133, which are these two lots. And so lot 249, which is this lot across the way here.
Oh, that's different than one.
Yeah, that's different than the
Yeah.
one, at least the one I was looking at
Yeah, me
online.
too.
So
Okay, it might have been an older layout.
It's the
where.
rendering.
Okay. I apologize for that.
what's the
That's-
date of the site plan, the revision date that references these lot numbers? If you could just make sure we're speaking the same language.
So this one is dated revision block of 11/2/22.
2 or 11/21.
We received this version on the screen. I believe it's January 18th or 19th. This was received of this.
Yeah, I think we didn't submit it until, it was one that was submitted in January. So,
Okay.
and then the remainder of those lots, which we had, were 236, 237, and I believe we had.
249.
Oops, I might have jumped. Oh, you know what? 249. I think what did I already go over? That's right. It's that other one.
Same plan.
There you go. Yeah, 249 I already said.
Okay.
And so basically, thank you. So basically, it's the ones that are the most intrusive on that projected runway. So to get back into some of the other design standards for the site, as Ms. Peet has already presented, the site plan is for 249 single-family homes in an AR1 cluster subdivision. The site will have central water, which will be provided by Artesian Water Resources, and the central water system will be designed in accordance with all regulatory standards, as well as Artesian standards. Twin Mast will also have a central sanitary sewer system, which will also be provided by Artesian. And the site does have a pump station in order to connect that sanitary sewer to the regional infrastructure. Again, that is going to be provided by Artesian. So the subdivision roads will be designed to meet Sussex County standards, and there will be an access point to this project off of Round Pole Bridge Road. Those entrance improvements will be designed in accordance with DELDOT standards. So speaking of DELDOT, I'm going to begin presenting some portions of a presentation that was prepared by Betty Tustin, who's the project's traffic engineer. Betty is with the traffic group. Unfortunately, as previously indicated, Betty is not here today. But I am certainly able to discuss portions of the traffic information, but I would like to point out that when it comes to certain aspects of the traffic impact study, there may be areas extending a bit outside of my area of expertise. I'm a registered civil engineer, and I'm not a traffic concentration. I do a certain degree of traffic calculations associated with entrance plan improvements, but when it comes to the actual models and things of that nature, I do not personally put them together. Betty has, professional transportation operational engineer certification, and so that PTOE certification kind of allows her for a much more in-depth analysis of those traffic demand models. It's a very particular concentrations in civil engineering. The traffic impact study is prepared by the traffic group and as well as DELDOT. And the traffic group is the traffic engineers associated with this project. And so DELDOT, in accordance with its memorandum of understanding with Sussex County, reviewed the traffic impact study, which we have completed for the Twin Mast development. As it is required in Development's coordination manual, any proposed development projected to generate more than 50 peak hour trips or more than 200 daily trips is required to complete a traffic impact study. There is an exception, but this project does not apply. DELDOT selects the intersections for a study based on a travel demand model, which forecasts travel patterns for a proposed development. Intersections are selected based on the number of trips for the proposed development that are projected to pass through that intersection. Study intersections are identified if more than 50 peak hour trips are projected to pass through that intersection. The intersections selected for the study based on this criteria are Round Pole Bridge and Hudson Road, Route 1 and Hudson Road / Steamboat Landing Road, Route 1 and Delaware Route 16, Delaware Route 1 and Delaware Route 1 second crossover south of Hudson Road, Delaware Route 1 and Eagle Crest Road / Oyster Rocks Road, Hudson Road and Eagle Crest Road, Hudson Road and River Rock Way, Hudson Road and Falls Road, Hudson Road and Sweetbriar Road, and of course the site access on Round Pole Bridge Road. I understand there was a comment that the intersection of Round Pole Bridge and Cave Neck was a concern to at least one local resident. This intersection was not selected for the study because less than 50 peak hour trips are projected to pass through this intersection from the proposed development. Most of the traffic goes up towards Hudson Road rather than coming down Round Pole Bridge Road. These intersections were studied on a typical weekday as well as a Saturday during the summer months. DELDOT required that we inflate the traffic counts collected at the study intersections by regional growth factors to represent traffic volumes when the project is completed. It's estimated to be completed in 2028. So DELDOT has required that we include traffic volumes and other developments in the area. That includes Compass Point, Chapel Farm, and Vincent Overlook. Finally, to reach the peak hour volumes to be studied, we added in peak hour trips that are projected to be generated by Twin Mast. So not surprisingly, the result of the analysis indicate that study intersections along Delaware State Route 1 are projected to operate at unsatisfactory levels of service and the traffic engineering criteria by which intersections are judged. I say not surprisingly because DELDOT is committed to investing a significant amount of dollars into traffic-related concerns along this section of Delaware Route State Route 1. As you're aware, the construction of a grade separated intersection on Route 1 and Route 16 is already underway. This project is anticipated to be completed in 2025. So moving southward, DELDOT has a project along Route 1 from a point of the intersection with Hudson Road and Steamboat Landing Road southward to a point beyond the intersection of Route 1 with Eagle Crest and Oyster Rocks Road. This project is going to eliminate some of the crossovers and restrict certain movements at the intersections. At the intersection with Hudson Road, left turns from Hudson Road and Steamboat Landing onto Route 1 will be restricted. Vehicles will not be able to cross straight across Hudson Road to Steamboat Landing Road either. At the intersection with Eagle Crest Road, left turns from Route 1 onto Eagle Crest Road and onto Oyster Rocks will be restricted. Similarly, vehicles will not be able to cross straight across Eagle Crest Road to Oyster Rocks Road. A third project along Route, third project along Route 1 is a grade separated intersection at Cave Neck Road. This project is slated to be in construction in 2025. So you may note a bit of a trend with these projects, and that is limiting motions across Route 1, which is the goal. As part of the highway preservation corridor, DELDOT is trying to restrict access on the Route 1 as well, which is why we cannot have an access point on Route 1. DELDOT does not want it. So Typically, a proposed development would be required to make roadway improvements to mitigate any level of services deficiencies at the study intersections. However, in this case, since DELDOT has projects designed and either under construction or planned for construction in the near future, the Twin Mast development will be making financial contributions to these projects. DELDOT has a fourth project in the study area that's at the intersections of Hudson Road, Cave Neck Road, and Sweetbriar Road. A roundabout has been selected for these intersections and is scheduled to begin construction in 2024. The Twin Mast development will also be making a financial contribution to this project. So with these various DELDOT projects, traffic patterns are anticipated to change in the future. Less traffic will be using Hudson Road, as left turns from Hudson Road onto northbound State Route 1 will be prohibited. The grade separations will be located to the north at Route 16 and to the south at Cave Neck Road, which will attract drivers in other directions to reach their destinations along Route 1. The Twin Mast development will also be improving Round Pole Bridge Road along their frontage. They'll be providing 11-foot travel lanes with 5-foot shoulders as required by DELDOT. We'll be constructing a right turn lane into the development to remove these turning vehicles from the vehicles continuing on Round Pole Bridge Road. I'd like to point out that DELDOT projected that nearly 85% of the trips generated by the Twin Mast development will travel to and from the east via Hudson Road. Few trips generated by the Twin Mast development will travel to and from the west on Round Pole Bridge Road. And this is just a reminder, these are numbers developed by DELDOT. It was reviewed by traffic engineers and accepted, meaning several experts confirmed these numbers. Speaking of trips, I'd like to remind you and the public that trips do not equal the number of additional cars on the road. One vehicle may make several trips in and out of the development. And please know that I said in and out. We count a vehicle trip as vehicle leaving as one trip and a vehicle returning as one trip for a total of 2 trips. In other words, when we as traffic engineers, and remember this is from Betty, say, for example, that a hypothetical development would generate 1,000 daily trips, we mean that there will be 500 daily trips leaving, 500 daily trips returning, and they will not be leaving and returning at the same time. I also want to remind you that these trips dissipate as they move in different directions in the study area. In other words, not all the 500 daily trips in our hypothetical example that leave Twin Mast will pass through each of these study intersections. As they have different destinations, they take different routes. In addition to the results of this traffic study, I'd also like to mention a few more things. The Federal Highway Administration conducts an annual survey of bridges for the year 2022. 1.6% of Delaware's 872 bridges, which is 14 bridges, are classified as structurally deficient. The American Road and Transportation Builders Association reported the top 10 structurally deficient bridges in Delaware, and only one is in Sussex County, and that is Route 54 over the Assawoman Bay in the Fenwick Island area. With regard to safety on Round Pole Bridge Road, we conducted a speed study near our site access and also requested crash data from DELDOT. Our speed study showed that 85% of the vehicles travel 34 miles per hour or less in the westbound direction, 85% of the vehicles travel 31 miles per hour or less in the eastbound direction. The average speeds are 27 miles per hour westbound and 31 miles per hour eastbound. According to DELDOT's crash statistics, there have been 4 crashes along the entirety of Round Pole Bridge Road in the past 3 years. All these were single vehicle crashes. 3 involved a deer, 1 involved a ditch. Only 1 involved an injury. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to review the traffic impact study for Twin Mast as well as any other significant traffic issues. So with that, I'm going to conclude my portion of the presentation. And just, we are going to be here for questions afterwards, but I believe Ms. Pete has some additional information to provide.
Great.
I'll leave that to you now. Or just leave it up here.
I'll need to hang on to that. You should leave it connected because we may need it.
Thank you again, Ed and Jim. The final portion of our presentation addresses the compliance with the zoning and subdivision code and ordinances specifically. Twin Mast complies with the purpose of the municipal code section 115-19 in the comprehensive plan by proposing a low-density single-family residential development that protects water resources, watersheds, and scenic views. Specifically, Municipal Code Section 115-20 of AR1 permits single-family detached homes on individual lots. The code section, specifically 115-21, allows for outdoor amenities by community occupants or their guests. All community signs in Twin Mast will conform to the code section 159.2 as well. The parcel is located in AR1 and will comply with all minimum height area and bulk requirements. Section 4.4.2 of the Comprehensive Code discusses the structure of the future land use plan, and I know the Commission is aware of this, but for the public's benefit, that plan explains that the county is divided into two types of planning areas, growth areas and rural areas. The site's located within the low-density area. In that designation, single-family detached homes are permitted at 2 homes per acre, where a cluster-style site plan is used and a portion of the tract is preserved as permanent open space. This project is located in Investment Level 4. The Cabinet Committee on State Planning Issues through the Office of State Planning Coordination developed the first strategies for state policies and spending documented maps in '99 to be updated every 5 years, with the most recent update in 2020. The state strategies were designed to help the committee guide state investment decisions and serve as a framework for coordinating plans and actions of local government. Chapter 4 of the Sussex County Comprehensive Plan explains that the state strategies for state policies map and spending map classifies areas as investment levels 1, 2, 3, or 4, and that the 4 investment levels clarify the state's policies and priorities for the expenditure of state funds on infrastructure. As the comprehensive plan states, the state strategies for state policies and spending map are not parcel-based and are not a land use plan, and it is required that any land development activity be in compliance, obviously, with the comprehensive plan and meet all relevant codes and ordinances of local jurisdictions. So what does this mean for this project? Well, the parcels are located, as I said, in the low-density area that permits single-family homes at 2 units per acre and is consistent with the comprehensive plan for reasons stated today. It may be true that the state will not prioritize funding in investment level 4, but that does not mean development cannot take place in this classification level. And what is critically important to understand, and I know the public, I believe, is also possibly aware of this, is that major subdivisions have consistently been approved in this area in Sussex County. The project complies with Chapter 115-25E of the AR1 district design requirements for reasons stated in our project reference materials, as well as section, specifically Chapter 115-25 for a cluster development as well. To conclude, I'm going to address the 99-9C requirements specifically. This proposed plan complies with the 99-9C requirements of the code because the plan, for reasons stated, integrates the proposed subdivision into existing terrain and surrounding landscape. As the plan shows, the applicant proposes significant open space totaling 51.5% of the entire site, provides minimum landscape buffers, and all proposed lots are located with a minimum of 40 feet from the outbound to the property. All lots will be configured outside of the regulated wetlands that were discussed today, and minimum buffers have been provided. There are no known sites that require historic preservation on the site. The plan, as I've stated and has been stated multiple times, preserves large tracts of open space and preserves scenic views. There'll be a minimization of tree removal, as explained by Mr. Erickson. Screening of objectionable features from neighboring properties and roadways will be provided as explained. Water will be provided by artesian. Wastewater will be provided by artesian. The stormwater management system will incorporate best management practices for stormwater treatment and discharge in accordance with state and local standards. The proposed development is planned in a way to minimize erosion and sedimentation, changes in groundwater levels, increased rates of runoff, potential for flooding, and design of drainage so that groundwater recharge is maximized, again, as provided by Mr. Erickson. The plan accounts for safe vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site to adjacent ways, as explained by Mr. Erickson. It is anticipated the proposed twin mast communities will cause current property values to remain the same, if not increase values in the area. The proposed subdivision will not adversely affect adjacent farmland, considering the buffer and other natural areas provided. One point of access is proposed off Round Pole Bridge Road, as explained. The project is near other residential land uses and is therefore compatible in design, density, home style, and land use. And finally, there will be an efficient stormwater management system, as explained, that acts as an amenity for this community. And finally, the plan is consistent with the Sussex County Comprehensive Plan for the reasons stated this evening and for reasons stated in the applicant's submission and as prepared by Solutions. And specifically, I'd just like to address, before I conclude, some of the specific conditions of approval. I understand that Condition P specifically might need some redrafting, and I'm sure the public may have some comment on that as well. But we did also provide some unique conditions on this particular application. I'm not going to read everything to you, but Condition F specifically states that dirt berms shall be installed where feasible along the perimeter portion between the site and Route 1. And it specifically states dirt berms shall be installed where feasible along the perimeter of the site adjacent to Coastal Highway Route 1, provided that said dirt berms are permitted by applicable agency. This berm shall not be required in areas where existing forest or similar vegetation may be retained along Coastal Highway, not to say that that may not occur. And the dirt berms shall not exceed 4 feet in height, and shall be vegetated in a manner consistent with best husbandry practices. There was also a comment in the record with respect to nearby hunting activities, and we did include in Condition O language that requires a notice advising nearby property owners of hunting activities in the area. And I know Commissioner Hoy Stevenson has raised that on some other applications, so we did incorporate that here as well. And then, as I previously stated, Condition P is also unique to this application. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation and request the Commission's favorable consideration of this application. As I said, our team's here to answer questions that may be raised during public comment. Thank you very much.
All right, we thank you. Let's stand by, if you will. We'll see if anyone on the commission has any questions for you. We'll start with Ms. Hoy Stevens.
Yeah, well, you did answer some of them, and I will say I appreciate on this that you, in the really crappy soil part, you did not put houses, so that was nice with the severely limited part. But yeah, the traffic is a big, big deal on this. You go on from 290 trips a day to 2,407 trips per day. So I am concerned about the road, and so you would be upgrading the road there at Round Pole Bridge Road where your property is. But go ahead.
Yes, that's correct. We'd be upgrading the road and the projected frontage of the property, which would include Round Pole Bridge Road out to Hudson Road.
Did you request an entrance onto Route 1 at all?
So we had discussions with DelDOT regarding the corridor preservation, and they said that they do not want entrances on Route 1 in that meeting.
Is there somebody here from DelDOT that I could ask about this?
Actually, I believe we have
Very
two.
hard to hear back here.
Well, thank you for letting me know. Is there someone here from DelDOT I can ask some questions?
Yeah, I believe we actually have two representatives here this evening, and if you just make yourselves known.
We have some
There we go.
aviation
There
folks.
they are. I knew they were here somewhere. We're going to ask our representatives from DelDOT to come up and answer some questions, but I want to make sure that the public understands that in the ongoing effort to improve intergovernmental coordination between state and local government, that the DelDOT has very graciously